I would like to thank Dr. Holly Winter and Karen Hendricks for organising this event, and to everyone at the Near Eastern Archaeology Foundation in Sydney. Thank you for turning up tonight to see this presentation, and for everyone online, the guests as well. Thank you for turning up to hear this event, and I hope that you have provided to me a great opportunity to speak about an important but relatively understudied part of Lebanon, that being the Bekaa Valley. Moreover, for this talk, I will illustrate some ways in which the techniques of landscape archaeology can provide new information on different aspects of this region's archaeology. So, shown here on this introductory slide is the landscape I'm going to talk about. If many people have not been to the Bekaa, this is a typical view of the Bekaa Valley. In the foreground, we can see the Niha Valley. I'm going to see if I can, yes, I'm going to use my. So here in the foreground it is the Niha Valley. And in the center here we have the village of Niha. And just to the north of that, you can see these tall walls, which are the remains of an impressive Roman period sanctuary. And beyond this tributary valley, which leads into the larger Bekaa Valley, and you can see the wide plain of the Bekaa Valley beyond, and in the background, this is the anti-Lebanon mountain of Lebanon, and on the top there, the border with Syria. Okay, so as an entity then, the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon can be interpreted as a zone of cultural transformation, and a region that has experienced a particular settlement history as a result of a specific combination of physical geography and the resultant multiple microecologies that have been established there. Now, these qualities have attracted some scholars. Among these, and notable in terms of studying landscape development, was Leon Marfaux. And in the 1970s, Leon Marfaux sought to establish various models to explain the special nature of the Bekaa region's socio-cultural development. Now, many of his models were developed before the advent of current ideas of landscape archaeology and are long overdue for reappraisal. And until recently, the prospect of undertaking a large-scale systematic program of fieldwork using current landscape archaeological techniques was very limited. In this presentation, I will be talking about some of the fieldwork I have completed in this region in answer to a number of specific research questions. I will be concentrating on two research areas in particular, which attracted me to doing the fieldwork in the first place. Now, the first area of research is centered on obtaining useful information from a very damaged site, damaged as a result of human conflict. Okay. The second area involves exploring wider issues of landscape development in the past and the exploration of simple, low-cost landscape archaeological techniques to collect relevant information to explain long-term landscape development. Now, both of these aims relate to my more general interest in investigating the Bekaa and settlement change that occurred particularly during and before and after the Roman period, and in the Roman period especially, when this region became part of the Roman colony of Berytus. That is, Berytus is modern-day Beirut, and the Bekaa Valley became a significant part of this Roman colony. And as a Roman archaeologist, this has served as a major attraction to me in trying to understand the cultural changes with the coming of Rome to the region. Okay, if we look on a wider regional scale, the mountainous areas of modern Lebanon and Western Syria has long been known to contain many remains of monumental Roman temple complexes. These are a very dense collection, which makes the region unique in the Roman world. So this is an additional attraction to looking at the Roman period of Lebanon. Now, before I tackle the two main research areas that I want to look at, that is conflict damaged sites and Roman landscape development, I would very much like to thank the Directorate General of Antiquities of Lebanon for making this fieldwork activity possible. Now, this has sometimes been quite difficult. The Bekaa is a challenging context, and it is, of course, as you know, an environment today which is proving particularly challenging for the DGA to operate in. So I'd like to just say hats off to the DGA and their important current work. And in particular, I would like to thank the director of the DGA, Sarkis El-Khoury, and also archaeologists Rafi Jejan and Lamis Jamal for their continued help to me and support in the field. I would also like to acknowledge the help of the University of Leicester, particularly Ruth Young as co-director of the project, and the American University of Beirut for generously funding the project and providing keen students of archaeology, as you can see here, to take part in the fieldwork and collect all the data. I thought I'd show this picture as for the rest of the presentation, people are notable by their absence. So it is useful to remember that all the data has been created and collected by people, notably AUB students. Okay. Now, I started this project on a very small scale way back in 2012 and have continued on and off as opportunities have been open. What first attracted me to the Niha Valley was events beyond the Bekaa and the increasingly worsening Syrian conflict. As we all know, conflict is impacting the lives of many millions of people and the archaeology and heritage of many nations. And I think this is a very current thing to think about today, in today's world. All conflict-damaged archaeology and heritage can play a vital role as resources to help rebuild damaged communities and offer hope of employment and reintegration to those impacted by war. Being able to offer ways of thinking of how to deal with damaged sites, gain as much information from them, and consider them a valuable resource rather than an inevitable casualty of war is critical to moving forward and regaining control over land and identity. Many archaeological and heritage sites have been affected directly by military action, either through direct conflict or collateral damage, such as tells being used as military strongpoints or bases. Many more archaeological sites and heritage artifacts have been affected by the breakdown of state and society in conflict zones. No matter the causes, whether the removal of state control and the opportunities this has provided for antiquity looting, or as a necessity in order for local populations to survive, or even as a political act, sites of all kinds, such as Apamea, the well-known Greco-Roman town in Syria, have been damaged massively over several years, as shown here. And of course, this damage to cultural heritage is occurring in many regions, even as I speak. Consequently, we need to find ways of dealing archaeologically with damaged sites in post-conflict contexts. This is not an alternative to prevention and long-term solutions, but purely as a way of working with the resources that we do have. So for the first part of this session, I'm going to talk about the site of Hosn Niha in the Niha Valley as a case study and example of how to obtain information from badly damaged archaeological sites. Okay. Now, along with many other sites in Lebanon, Hosn Niha was severely damaged as a consequence of decades of civil war and the associated unruliness and accelerated looting that went with this. Now, one of the most striking structures at this site are the prominent remains of a monumental stone-built Roman period temple sanctuary complex, mainly dating to the 2nd century CE. And this is a plan here of that temple complex. There is 2 temples. There is a later church that was built in front of the main temple, and there are other associated buildings with this monumental temple sanctuary. Right. Okay. Now, as I said, in the Greco-Roman period in Lebanon, this period sees the appearance of numerous monumental stone temples in the foothills of the mountains which surround the Bekaa Valley. And since impressive standing remains of many of these temples survive, they have received much more academic attention than other types of sites, or even the remains of other structures around them. In contrast to the extensive work on the monumental temples, such as Temple A at Hosn Niha, we know very little about the local populations who paid for and who built such temples. And we know very little about their wider cultural practices, or indeed much about the daily lives of people away from these temple complexes. So this is a picture of the main temple at Hosn Niha. It's in an isolated location. So this has helped in furthering its survival as a monumental ruin. So just to give you a sense of scale, this is Ruth Young here, and the standing walls are over 10 meters tall. if we look at this drone shot of Temple A, you can get a sense of its size, but also how it is kind of attached to the landscape. It's a big temple then, 40 meters long. All the stone, much of the stone was quarried from nearby. This is one of the quarries. And we know quite a lot about this temple in terms of its architecture. We know that it was unfinished. You can see these ashlar blocks haven't been fully finished off. We know it was a pro-style, tetra-style temple, typical on the outside of Roman period temples, and it is an amazing survival from the Roman period. Just one of many in the mountains of Lebanon. Okay, but as I said, not much attention was paid to the settlement which is related to this temple. And this is a typical scenario for many of the temple complexes across Lebanon. The temples have been studied, but not much is known about the settlements which were responsible for building these temples. Okay, so below the temple complex at Hosn Niha, which is to the right on this photograph, further up the slope, we have the site of a large, extensive village, which, as you can see in this photograph, displays signs of heavy disturbance caused by military activity, opportune digging, and agricultural encroachment. On early visits to the site, it was clear to us that the settlement below the main temple sanctuary had suffered substantial damage. Archaeologists who had previously worked at Hosn Niha had all focused on the temple complex. The surrounding village was deemed far too seriously damaged by activity during the Civil War to be worth investigating. And it was thought that no information could be obtained from these now bulldozed piles of rubble. And you can see this is part of the village by the river Nar, the site of the stream, water that goes past the village, and there is clear evidence of bulldozing what remained of the village houses into massive piles of stones. When planning work at the site, we were faced with the question, should we just ignore Hosn Niha and by extension other badly damaged sites? Of course, the opposite is the case, that with the correct research design in place, critical questions can be addressed, and with the appropriate field and analytical techniques, very useful data can be collected from badly damaged sites and from unpromising beginnings. So, in conjunction with the Lebanese Department of Antiquities, we devised a project to investigate the site of the settlement, which included these key aims. The first was to put the sanctuary development in context and resituate it within a social environment. Achieving this would contribute to the second aim, which was a better understanding of the period of the Roman colony of Berytus. And parallel to these aims, and of great importance, was the provision of a detailed assessment of damage to the site itself that enhanced cultural resource management. This was to also include the quantification of the nature and effect of other developmental processes on the site, such as encroaching agriculture. Okay. Right. So, two main approaches were used to record the surface archaeology: survey of structures and features and of pottery density. And we carried out a simultaneous assessment of the damage to the site through bulldozing and other activities, such as opportune excavations and recent agricultural activities. The first method was the recording of any visible features using the differential GPS, which allowed very accurate spatial positioning of surface features, whilst also providing a simple but accurate representation of them. Systematic recording revealed a diverse range of well-preserved structure types and other features beyond the main sanctuary, which you can see here in the center of this plan. Now, these included quarries, a non-Graeco-Roman high place sanctuary, quarries, zones of rock-cut tombs on the edges of the settlement, and in the east, a variety of tomb types from stone sarcophagi to communal rock-cut cyst tombs, which together represented a cemetery area, designated cemetery. There are also several structures right across the site that we have interpreted as dwellings. Our feature recording methodology has systematically expanded our understanding of what survives, so that it is now clear that a number of dwelling and associated structures are still discernible at other locations beyond the damaged areas of the site, especially in the eastern area. There are still intact remains of dwellings. Many architectural features and also structural features survived in a number of places around the site. So these features included various wall types, a significant number of carved stones, such as door lintels, sarcophagi, column shafts, and bases. So the second method we used was the intensive recording of both the density of surface pottery and the collection of a sample of diagnostic scherts through a series of intensive 50-meter transects. So on this map, you can see the resultant mapping of the conflict damaged regions of the site. That's this striped area. These are what we mapped as conflict damaged areas, i.e. mainly bulldozed. So obtaining indications of the density of the surface pottery was designed to help define the spatial limits of the settlement. The collection of diagnostics provided a spatially located sample of date and function, and even provided some pointers to different activity zones within the settlement. So moving on to results, the intensive fieldworking exercise revealed concentrations of clicked surface scherts. So these are every time someone saw a sherd on the surface, they clicked on a clicker so that we could obtain this density map of the coverage of surface scherts. And we also mapped the density of diagnostic scherts as well across the site. So one conclusion that we have argued is that the areas which were attractive to bulldozing in these striped areas would have also been the core of the settlement, possibly the original point of settlement foundation. The densest areas of occupation and perhaps the longest occupied parts of the village. Okay. When the village structures have been very badly damaged over a number of years of conflict-related destruction, with the use of carefully selected appropriate methodologies closely linked to obtaining information, it has been possible to obtain a large amount of data at Hosn Niha. So the integration of all this data has resulted in a good understanding of the detailed organization of the village and its associated structures, including new insights into the relationship between settlement and temple. And we will come back to these ideas a bit later in the talk. The results of this work and approach have also given us an initial relatively detailed assessment of the settlement of Hosn Niha, which will provide a valuable foundation for future research and CRM requirements. So the conclusion from the first part really is that this has been a highly successful exercise in exploring a very badly damaged site. Now, moving on beyond the investigation of a single site and thinking about ancient settlement in the region as a whole, the Bekaa to me has always been a fascinating region of modern Lebanon, situated as it is 800 meters, the plain area 800 meters above sea level. It has always provided a impressive visual impact. It gives an illusion of a certain separateness, a sense intensified when approaching from the coast, as one descends the bordering mountain slopes of Mount Lebanon into the plain below. So the valley floor is a flattish plain, 100 kilometers or so long, yet only 8 to 10 kilometers wide, sandwiched between two very high and imposing mountain chains, the Lebanon and the Anti-Lebanon. It is this essential physical geography of the Bekaa Valley region which engenders some notions of remoteness and difference and otherness, particularly when we see this from the aspect of the coast of the Mediterranean. I think that the resultant environment provoked reactions in visitors and has also helped shape the lives of the valley inhabitants. The physical characteristics help create mental maps and a sense of place unlike the rest of Lebanon, which has ultimately an outlook to the Mediterranean Sea, and in the eastern direction to the dry semi-desert steppe. This is not to deny the fact that the valley provides very good north-south communication routes, but there is a distinct separation from the coast as witnessed, and we see this in the archaeology, as witnessed by the different pottery assemblages associated in the Bekaa Valley as compared to the coastal regions in particular. Now, the special position of the Bekaa as a zone of transformation has attracted scholars who have sought to establish theories that explain the region's special nature and why it developed in particular ways. Most prominent of these is the work of Leon Marfo, who undertook an innovative archaeological site survey in the early 1970s across the whole of the valley floor. As can be seen on this slide, the grey dots show the sites that Marfo mapped along the valley floor. Older landscape surveys are shown located around the key historic urban sites of Kamidalos, and also there is the later surveys centered around Baalbek. Now, since this time, I know a number of other surveys have also been started in different parts of the Bekaa Valley. But I want to hone in on this area here, as this is the core, area C, the core of our survey project area. Now, if we look at the context, the wider context of the Bekaa, a key period of change for the Bekaa was during the Roman period. In the last years of the 1st century BCE, at some time between 29 and 17 BCE, the Bekaa was incorporated into the Roman colony of Berytus, situated in Beirut. Now, this incorporation involved the settlement of veteran Roman soldiers who expected to be given plots of agricultural land. Where exactly these former soldiers were settled has been subject to interpretation. However, the likelihood is that most were given land in the central Bekaa between Baalbek and where the large sanctuary, famous large Roman sanctuary, was developed, and modern Stura, which is in this position here to the southwest of Zale. And if we look at the distribution of stone funerary inscriptions completed in Latin, we can obtain a reasonable idea of the basic distribution of settlers as being situated in settlements in the central Bekaa, and these settlements are positioned along the edges of the valley, on the valley slope edges. Now, these regions along the edge of the valley are attractive for settlement for a number of reasons, including access to perennial supplies of water in the form of karstic springs, a series of minor valleys which lead off the main valley, and these can provide shelter from harsh winter winds that flow down the valley, the main valley, and access to two different but conveniently useful agricultural environments. Gentle, well-drained, south-facing limestone slopes on this side, and flat areas of terra rossa type soils in the main plain area of the valley. Now, the slopes are ideal for growing vines, and the plain can be used for cereal crops. Areas immediately around a village settlement can be used for fruit trees and market gardening. So these conditions proved very attractive to the settlement of Roman veteran soldiers. In undertaking extensive fieldwork, our area has been to look at the extent to which the landscape around the villages has been used in past periods. There are many questions which require answers to this. But here I'm going to talk about issues of settlement foundations and sites outside settlements. Now, as you can see on this slide of Marfo's 1970s survey, the sites listed tend to be the wholly known sites of villages which continue to be occupied today. These are coloured in red on this slide. Or They are well-known sites of substantial monumental remains of Roman buildings, along with a few chance finds of prehistoric material. Beyond these, there was very little known archaeologically about this central Bekaa area. The dating of many of these sites relies on mention in historical sources for the Islamic periods and architectural features or small collections of dated pottery for the other sites. So, I shall therefore go on to describe some of the work we have so far completed in the fieldwork of the region and make some preliminary suggestions as to what it means. So this map here is the region which we have concentrated on, mainly two parallel valleys, the Niha Valley and also the adjacent Fursel Valley. Now, both these valleys have remains for monumental Roman temple sanctuaries. There's one at Hosn Niha, there's one at Niha, and there's an additional one at Fursel. We also did some exploratory field walking in the regions between these valleys and also around in the major settlement, Islamic and earlier Roman settlement at Karak Nur, because this was an important village administrative center during the early Islamic period and into the Middle Ages. So it also was a site of a Roman temple sanctuary. So this is the area that we have been operating in to obtain a much more detailed signature of the landscape development and go beyond Martho's widely spaced and initial survey. Basically, we wanted to get a much more detailed coverage and have a greater idea about the position and existence of smaller archaeological sites beyond the main settlement sites mapped by Martho. Okay, so our first focus of work has been the Niha Valley. This valley has the remains of two large Roman period temple structures, and associated with each structure, we know that there was a settlement. So this Google image, Earth image, shows the relative positions of the two main settlements of the valley. The village at Hosn Niha is now abandoned, as you have seen. And this is at a relatively high altitude of around 1,300 meters above sea level, and consequently is snowbound for at least a couple of months each year. At a lower level, or at an altitude of 1,000 meters above sea level, is the modern inhabited village of Niha, which overlays the site of the, at least we know, a Roman period settlement of Nihata, and which, besides the temple sanctuary, has provided the largest number of Latin inscriptions in the Bekaa outside the town of Baalbek. Obviously, the temple sanctuary would seem to have helped this site become an important settlement in the Roman period. However, it has been unclear what was happening in other periods at Niha, and questions of its first foundation of a settlement were unclear. And the same goes for Hosn Niha. In finding answers to these research questions, then, a key method to begin with is the use of field walking in different sample areas. So this slide shows the whole of the Niha Valley, perhaps the key valley in this limestone area of foothills to Mount Lebanon. And in sampling different environments of this valley, we were keen to fieldwalk the modern settlements themselves, and also to fieldwalk the intervalley areas and also along the line of the settlements to get an understanding of when the fields were covered in terraces, and also we also wanted to take a sample of fields on the flat main plain of the Bekaa Valley and do a contrast analysis of these different environments. Okay, so now I'm just going to quickly go through some of the findings of this fieldwork process that we have undertaken. And I'm going to look at 3 different environments of field walking. So a key area I wanted to discuss is the village of Niha itself. This is typical of many settlements in the Bekaa today, in being a modern occupation of a much older settlement. Now, luckily, within the modern settlement of Niha, this is typical of many modern villages in the Bekaa, interspersed amongst the houses, the modern houses, are a number of small gardens and fields with olive trees and orchards, probably a scenario very similar to settlements in the past. Now, these areas provided an opportunity where we could do some systematic field walking with short transects, followed up by a collection of any surface diagnostic sherds of pottery and other finds. Now, the result of this, we put all the data into a GIS and generated a map of the spaces and fields of Niha. And this one shows the density of sherds that we collected, the surface sherds that we collected across the village. As can be seen, the highest density of sherds is at the core areas of the village. This is the main village core area here. And as you might expect, this is where we get the densest area of surface sherds. Also noticeable is that as you move away from the core area of the village, the density of surface sherds falls away very rapidly. And also noticeable is a lack of sherds on the terraces which line the steep village slopes around this compact valley area where most of the modern village is located. However, it seems that a lot of these terraces have been bulldozed in the recent past, which could explain the lack of sherds in these areas. But we did find some older terraces, abandoned terraces, and again, there was very little evidence for sherds on these terraces. So this gives a good indication that surface sherds are usually, dense surface sherds are usually associated with site occupation, and there is very little evidence for manuring of fields and the distribution of sherds in that manuring process outside the villages or the settlements. Now, if we look at the upper valley region, in the fields below the site of Hosn Niha, now this is the site of the temple and the village of Hosn Niha, tucked up on the lower slopes of the mountainous area of Mount Lebanon. Below that, there was this, or there is this very fertile triangular valley. And you can also see that there is some recent terracing, modern terracing on these slopes, but there is also some ancient terracing as well on this side of the valley facing the village. So we decided to systematically walk the fields below the village as well to see what we could find. Now, when you do that, then you can again produce density of surface sherds, and this one is plotted at the same scale as the Niha fields lower down in the valley. And we can see that there is overall an extremely low density of sherds across the whole of the upper Hosn Niha valley. There's the temple in the area, the village. Okay. The exception, though, were these two fields, HN 104 and HN 105. And it is clear then that such higher densities would suggest the location of a discrete occupation site in this location, such as a small settlement or even a farmhouse. Again, noticeable is the regions with no sherds, and these are mainly terrace fields. Now, this is just a little bit of a play with the GIS data. And if the scale of sherd density is refined to a level of 1,000 square meters, and the class divisions are recalibrated to a different statistical process based on geometric intervals, this helps emphasize data divisions in low sherd number classes and provides a much more nuanced distribution that then emerges. So, although the numbers of surface sherds are very low, a consistency presents itself between the density of sherds on the flatter fields and those on the terrace slope areas. So this method helps intensify that sherd distribution, and it reveals the differences between certain areas, and it helps provide a better result, in a way, interpretive result. So this would suggest that there was perhaps a difference of land use in the past between the slopes and the flatter fields. Perhaps the slopes were not terraced and instead were given over to grazing. Or alternatively, the flat fields were given over to a more intensive farming regime than any terraced farming on the slopes. So it provides an interesting question as to land use. Now, if we look at the dated sherds from this region, we can see other interesting patterns. Particularly interesting is for the location of pre-Roman sherds. And you can see that they, which I've mentioned as pre-Hellenistic, Hellenistic, and when I talk about pre-Hellenistic, a lot of these sherds are Iron Age and earlier. So this area, HN 105, which was the densest area of sherds, also provided a very high number of Iron Age and some Bronze Age and a few Hellenistic sherds. So this allows us to date that site to a pre-Roman era, which adds interest to the idea of the development of this upper valley, in contrast to the village of Hosn Niha around the temple, where the datable sherds are only from the end of the 1st century BCE, early 1st century CE. So this suggests that there was a small settlement here for many earlier periods, and that this was really abandoned or very minor, and that in the Roman period, this is when we get a new settlement being established on around the site of the Roman temple sanctuary, which I think is quite interesting. For the fields below Niha, i.e. on the main Bekaa plain, the density of sherds is generally of a higher level than the fields in the valley just below the site of Hosn Niha, but still relatively low overall. That is except for field NH113, in which there was a very high density of Roman period sherds, especially of the early Roman period in this location. This high density of sherds is again linked to a specific small site at this location at the junction between the Niha Valley and the main Bekaa Valley, and suggests a site. We think that this might have been a large monumental burial site, which was at the junction of the road coming from the Niha Valley to the main Roman road leading to the sanctuary at and town at Baalbek. So this nuanced, fine-grained walking of the fields allows us to identify much smaller sites, and to get a better idea of the development of the landscape on a smaller scale. Right, now, the final aspect is that we are, as you have seen, is that we are beginning to investigate the dates of the pottery collected in the fieldwork exercise. For the lower area of fields, diagnostic Roman period sherds dominate, and there are only a few examples of datable Islamic sherds, and some sherds for periods prior to the Hellenistic period, which are mainly Bronze Age in date. Now, this distribution in terms of dated sherds in the fields of Hosn Niha and on the plain of the main Bekaa Valley can be compared to the diagnostic pottery collected from within the village of Niha. Yeah. Here, while there is a lot of diagnostic Roman pottery, as you might expect, there also seems to be, on initial analysis, an equally wide distribution of Islamic period pottery, which we don't get at Hosn Niha. Early Roman period pottery from the 1st century CE is especially prevalent in the regions closest to the Roman temple sanctuary at the north end of the village. Again, there are a few sherds of pottery from before the Hellenistic period. These would, on an initial scan, seem to date from the Bronze Age. The distribution of these sherds seems quite contiguous, as opposed to similar sherds on the lower fields of the plain of a similar date, which are much more widely dispersed. And so this may relate to some focused activity in the region of the later village of Niha. So what I'm suggesting here is that we can get a rough idea from collecting from these small fields, even though there may be issues associated with the movement of soil over time. If you collect enough evidence from enough fields, you can still get some sense, I think, of the long-term development history of these village settlements in the Bekaa Valley. And it would seem to me that for Niha, we have long-term occupation, that there is some form perhaps of settlement or other activities dating to the Bronze Age, and that over time this settlement develops and emphasis shifts around this settlement in different periods to different spatial locations around this village settlement site. Okay, so this helps situate the development of the temple complex at Niha, dated to the early Roman and 2nd century CE. It contextualizes that temple sanctuary development. We know that it is based around a number of springs in the northern part of the village. There is some evidence for late Hellenistic pottery, and it shows that in the Roman period, there was increased settlement development and activity towards the northern end of the village. And this could be related to the coming of veteran soldiers to a pre-existing village settlement. As for Hosn Niha, the diagnostic sherds from the village site and around the temple make it clear that this settlement was established at the time of the foundation of the Roman colony of Berytus. From intensive collection of sherds on the village site and around, there is really no diagnostic sherds before the end of the 1st century BCE. So this was a newly founded settlement to the north of a much older settlement down the valley at Niha. Okay, so overall, the results I've shown today are very early broad brushstrokes of the field walking which we have undertaken. In the near future, we expect more detailed work, hopefully, when this period of conflict ends. And we expect the work to complete analysis of the data we have collected and also undertake further work, including some targeted excavations to supplement the field work across the landscape. Now, what I have tried to demonstrate in this presentation is the potential of a more detailed and intensive investigation of sample areas of the Bekaa. These have been provided and will provide new insights into how the landscape was utilised in the past and allow us to improve on the settlement history as developed by archaeologists like Leon Marfo. So thank you very much for your attention to this presentation. Thank you.